Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Harry's Music Room. This is my final. You wouldn't. I'm not going to call it a deep dive because I'm not going into the music, but it is the final video that I'm going to do on my Chicago series, and it's basically going to be about their producer, James William Guercio, who was such a huge part of their success. Now, he produced. Well, we'll start at the beginning. He was going to college with Walter Perezader. Walter invited him to come and listen to his band called The Big Thing. So Jimmy went, liked them, asked if he could manage them. They agreed. And the first thing he did was move them from Chicago to Los Angeles and got them a house to stay in, rented the house for them, changed their name to Chicago Transit Authority, and pretty much the rest is history. But he didn't just work with Chicago. He also worked with the Buckinghams. And if you've heard the Buckinghams, it's it's rock and roll with horns in it, so it's no surprise. And I love these guys. I really do. Everything they did, I really, really like. And as typical with James's production of albums, this was heavily influenced with the brass. Um, he also did a band called, you might have heard of, Blood, Sweat, and Tears. This is their second album. Al Cooper started the band with Child is Father to Man, which is one of my all-time favorite albums. And they kind of parted ways because they didn't like the direction that Al was wanting to take the band. So they fired him from his own band. And then they hired David Clayton Thomas, and Guercio came in and produced this album, Grammy-winning album, album of the year. Good track record there. He also, their first album, of course, he did the first 11 albums by Chicago. And those are the same 11 albums that Terry Kath was involved in. And this all started because I wanted to kind of pay tribute to Terry Kath and how great he was as a guitarist. And then he also produced a band called Madura. Now, just like Chicago, Madura is a double album. Comes with a poster. Wouldn't be a James William Guercio production if it didn't have a poster in it and a double album. With this record and this band, just think Chicago with no horns. That's exactly what it's like. He also produced several Firesign Theater albums. I love, this is my favorite Firesign album right here. He was an original guitarist in Frank Zappa's Mothers of Invention. He was a movie producer. He produced 2 films. One of them was Electric Light and Blue, and the other one I honestly don't know the name of because I've never seen it, but I know he did produce 2. So he and Chicago, like I said, worked together for 11 albums. And Guercio bought a ranch in Colorado, 4,000-acre ranch, built a state-of-the-art 48-track recording studio, invited the band up to play, record there. The first record ever recorded at Caribou Studios was Joe Walsh, Barnstorm. And if you look at the cover, I believe that's taken on the property there. So the band goes up. They actually film a TV special there, which Al Green shows up and sings with them. And if you haven't seen it, go on YouTube. And if I can remember, I'll put a link below. Al Green in Chicago. You've got to see it. I'm so tired of being alone, they do. So Chicago gets there. They see this amazing place. They record like 5 albums there. And then they start putting two and two together, and they find out that he Guercio is getting 51% of their earnings, and they're splitting 49% among 8 members of the band. And he was getting 100% of their publishing royalties for 10 years. And they estimate that I'm not going to say he ripped him off, but funny business was, they kind of thought something funny was going on. They ended up firing him. And so that's where they split ways. Now, I'm going to read this because I can't remember all these names, but here's just some of the artists that recorded at Caribou Ranch. So, like I said, the first one was Joe Walsh's Rocky Mountain Way at Barnstorm. 5 Chicago albums. Elton John did the album called Caribou, and Captain Fantastic, the Brown Dirt Cowboy, and Rock of the Westies. Dan Fogelberg, Return to Forever, Billy Joel, Rod Stewart, Carole King, Stephen Stills, Waylon Jennings, Amy Grant, Supertramp, Badfinger, The Beach Boys, Donna Summer, Ozark Mountain Daredevils, Steely Dan, John Lennon, Phil Collins, Nitty Gritty Dirt Band, Jeff Beck, Rick Derringer, Sheena Easton, Michael Jackson, War, Eddie Rabbitt, Jerry Lee Lewis, Al Di Meola, America, Chick Corea, and Earth, Wind, and Fire recorded That's the Way of the World there, which is one of my top 10 favorite albums of all times. He also wrote the song Distant Shores for Chad and Jeremy. So in 1973, Guercio was given the opportunity to produce and direct a film called Electric Light and Blue. This is the soundtrack for that film, and it stars Robert Blake, among others. And the quote from this is that, he's this short guy, and all these other big, tall, 6'4" guys are all cops. Did you know that me and Alan Ladd were exactly the same height? Well, he wants to be a detective, and he's tired of just being a patrol officer. And there's like a hippie commune out in the hills, and there's an old man there that kind of is dealing drugs to these people. And this old man ends up dead. They ruled it a suicide, but he doesn't think it's a suicide. He sees a few things that seem out of place, and eventually they agree with him and they promote him to detective. So now he's going to go into figuring out how this guy died. And that's all I'm going to say, because I don't want to give away the plot, the rest of it. But that's the basic idea, and it's really well worth seeing if you haven't seen it. Members of Chicago have cameos in this movie. They play part of the hippie commune. Nick Nolte has an uncredited role as one of the hippies. But it's really a movie that it just, for me, it just stuck with me, and I enjoy watching it over and over. At the very end of the film, during the credits, Terry Kath wrote a song called Tell Me that is played, and I would love to show it to you. I'm going to share a link below, but it's not the link the way they show it in the film, because that's got a spoiler in it. I don't want to ruin it for anybody. But I will put a link below for the trailer to that movie, and also to the song Tell Me. Now, in addition to being a rancher, because he did actually ranch on those acreage he had there, a producer of film and records, and a guitarist. He played guitar on some of Chicago's best known songs. He played acoustic guitar. He played guitar and bass for the Beach Boys and managed the Beach Boys through the part of the 70s. But in addition to all that, he was also into sports. And in 1978, he co-owned the Colorado Caribous. Yeah, here we are with Caribou again. And he was co-owner with the future governor of Washington State, Booth Gardner. The team did not do well. They finished in last place. They were kind of a laughing stock partly because of the uniforms they wore. They had like leather fringe on them. They ended up selling the team to a group in Atlanta, where they were the Atlanta Chiefs. So many. I mean, there's way too many albums to mention that were recorded at Caribou Ranch, but there was a fire that pretty much destroyed the place, and that put an end to the recording there. He ended up selling off the land to, let's see what I have here. They were doing property development, oil and gas exploration, drilling, particularly coal bed methane wells. And he sold off a lot of the land to the state and to private investors. And I don't know if he still owns any of it or not. But then he also was the major owner of the country music television station, CMT, and ended up selling CMT to Westinghouse Broadcasting. So the guy's done really well for himself. He's set for life. Great producer. There's all kinds of stuff on YouTube that you can watch, interviews with him, which I watch most of them to try to get information for this video. But the guy was a really good producer, and because of him, we got some great music. So I hope you enjoyed this whole series on Chicago, and I look forward to doing some more deep dives with maybe not an entire catalog, but an album or two here and there. Thanks for watching. I really appreciate it. Until next time, ciao.